what MIT does well is, we focus on AI, and we make sure that it seems like the school wants the graduates to be prepared with AI, but also having that baseline understanding of how operations do run, how they can be optimized without AI, because implementing AI in an organization is not a small task. And if we walk out of MIT and we just try to throw AI at every problem, we'll probably fall flat on our face. So I think MIT does a good job at helping you understand the context that it's appropriate, and understanding kind of the tech burden that you're taking on with implementing an AI application. But then if you have a good use case for it, how would you develop that?
Welcome, everyone. My name is Terrell Williams, and I serve as one of the associate directors here in the Office of Admissions. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation today with Thursdays with Terrell. Today, we're going to be spotlighting the Operations Management Club. So now I want to pass it over to my guest for the afternoon. Kendall, you mind sharing a little bit of background, like pre-MBA experiences, what you did for your internship, and also, what things you're a part of here at Sloan?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Terrell. And welcome everybody to the this panel. Excited for your interest in MIT and especially the Operations Management Club. So my name is Kendall Munsey. I originally was in the Army as an engineer officer. I worked first in South Korea, working alongside Korean National Forces and fortifying the demilitarized zone. And then afterwards, I moved into recruiting operations, and then was interested in making a pivot over to the civilian sector on the management, like operations management side. Applied to MIT and got into the LGO program, which is a dual degree program with the business school, where you're still fully an MBA student at Sloan, but on the side you also take engineering classes and have some additional requirements. As part of my student life, so I'm the co-president of the Operations Management Club. Additionally, I served on a number of committees supporting the LGO program, and then I'm part of a number of affinity clubs. I'm in the golf club, in the ski and snowboard club, just things that kind of pertain to my hobbies and running, of course. So that's a little bit about myself.
Thank you for sharing, Ken. I'll go ahead and stop sharing now so we can have a little bit more of a one-on-one conversation. So you touched on your enrollment within the LGO program. Could you shed some more light on, why did you ultimately choose the LGO program, and ultimately what was your attraction to it?
Yeah, so I had a friend from a couple of years ago that I had known well, that had come to LGO, come to MIT, and had had a really good experience. And we had had a similar kind of trajectory in our military background. So that was appealing to me initially. But I think the other thing that I was interested in was I definitely wanted to break into corporate America. I wanted to be involved, we call it in the operations like the Gemba, which is just being where the work happens, not just being like in a control tower where you're kind of like sending down instructions, but you're really down where the work is happening for a company or for an organization. I liked doing that, but I wanted to have that higher picture that and I didn't have that coming from the military, especially when it came to, finances, corporate strategy, all those kind of domains. So that really drew me into getting my MBA. The element that I saw from LGO that was particularly interesting was, one, it had a really unique community and alumni group that was very tight, had really strong connections to a lot of different industries. So I knew I could get exposed to a lot of things that maybe I wouldn't have normally considered. Like, when I kind of came into LGO, I was thinking maybe I would go into defense. Or something a little bit closer to what I was familiar with. But I had recognized that within the LGO program, there was partnerships with so many companies that were in industries I wasn't kind of exposed to. So I thought that would be a great tool for me to get more exposure, to kind of build my expertise. And then, of course, the LGO program gives you kind of structures a coursework and curriculum that's really comprehensive and gives you, unique skill set that I think really sets apart you as a graduate.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that, Kendall. You briefly touched on the curriculum as
Yeah.
it pertains to the dual degree. We may have some individuals that may be interested in the LGO program or maybe recently accepted into the LGO program. So
Yeah.
could you shed some light on how the curriculum is built and how students are able to kind of balance both of those degree programs?
Yeah. And A lot of what you do in the LGO program, even if you're not in the program, you can still take most of these classes in a different flavor. So, even if you're not applying to LGO and you are interested in these topics, it's not exclusive to the program, but they give you more time and structure it in a pretty unique way. So first, you have an LGO summer. So you come a semester before or a summer before the rest of the MBA class, and you take it's a specific group of classes on analytics, probability, statistics, operations management, lean operations. You learn some coding. And in systems optimization. So you're getting a really strong technical foundation that really equips you to go into a lot of different areas of operations that you find particularly interesting. Afterwards, you have, your typical MBA requirements, and because you're a dual degree student, you'll have additional engineering classes that are tied to your engineering department. So I was in the civil and environmental engineering department. If you're in mechanical or aerospace or electrical engineering, you'll have unique requirements for that degree. So within civil and environmental, I particularly focused on sustainable logistics systems and supply chains, and that was where most of my technical coursework was kind of focused on. But I had classmates that were in mechanical engineering, and they were learning more about using AI for automating design or really optimizing manufacturing processes, that kind of thing. And then by the end, you do like a thesis that kind of accumulates all of the expertise you learned and what you had did on your internship.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. In admissions, we get a lot of questions about, how AI is being infused in the curriculum. I'm happy you touched on it. So could you
Yeah.
share some of the classes that, have addressed, how AI is transforming operations that you've been able to, take while you've been at Sloan?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that with AI and what LGO and what MIT does well is, we focus on AI, and we make sure that it seems like the school wants the graduates to be prepared with AI, but also having that, baseline understanding of how operations, historically are, do run, how they can be optimized without AI, because implementing AI in an organization is not a small task. And if we walk out of MIT and we just try to throw AI at every problem, we'll probably fall flat on our face. So I think MIT does a good job at helping you understand the context that it's appropriate, and understanding kind of the tech burden that you're taking on with implementing an AI application. But then if you have a good use case for it, how would you develop that? So a couple of the things that I think are useful, class wise, we have, operations strategy, which is we have intro to operations management and operations strategy. Those give you, it's less of an AI flavor, but it's focused generally on, how do you manage operations? How do you optimize them? How do you have a business strategy that aligns with an operations strategy that makes sense? But then we also have, to your point with AI, there's analytics of operations management, which is taught by Mohammed Fazil Zarandi. Really great class on, okay, you have these operations problems. How can you implement artificial intelligence or some really advanced analytics or optimization models to improve those in a very data-driven way? We also have, the analytics edge and data models and decisions, which is a required MBA class, or required MBA class. And that gives you a great understanding of any kind of business problem you're facing that you have like a data set on. How can you use AI and, even just some basic analytics to give you a better kind of data-driven decision. And then, of course, there's also hands-on deep learning, which is a really popular one if you want to understand beyond just kind of basic analytics like descriptive and predictive analytics, but you want to get into some more deep learning like neural networks and whatnot in large language models. That's a really fantastic class where the professor not only kind of explains how these tools are used, but helps you understand how you can, develop them.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that. We often get that question in admissions, especially with this rapid change and rapid growth. So definitely thank you for sharing insight on specific classes that kind of target that particular topic area. So Ken, I want to kind of shift gears a little bit to talk more about the Operation Management Club, and
Yeah.
how did you get involved within the club, and what are some initiatives that you are particularly fond of since you've been co-president?
Yeah, so I joined the operations management club my first year. I wanted to be involved in Sloan. I wanted to kind of support, help out the community and be involved in the community. And I saw it as like a good opportunity for me to not only increase my own exposure to the industry, but also to help others do as well. So the first year I was a VP of events and worked a lot with sourcing speakers, coordinating event logistics for the things we were doing, setting up socials for the club, and then we also do a simulation competition that is worldwide. Essentially, if you do an operations class or if you've had any background in like industrial engineering, you may have done like a simulation before where you managed a factory and made different production decisions to optimize your profits and your capacity and whatnot. We juice that up and make it into a competition with prize money. So my first year, I really managed, kind of ran that, and we had tremendous success with bringing in a really diverse group of teams, and had a couple of MIT team that brought home a good amount of prize money too. And then this year, as the co-president, the thing that and the reason I really like the operations management club is that a lot of business school students don't come in to business school thinking I want to do operations. That was something I was interested in, but a lot of business school students are interested in consulting or finance, and want to be on kind of the business side, managing maybe more strategic decisions for a company. What I've kind of really tried to do with the operations management club is bring operations to so many different areas of business, because so many professionals eventually end up running operations. If you end up doing a startup, or you do entrepreneurship through acquisition, or you're doing private equity, or even in your consulting work, a lot of those fields all end up touching the actual execution of business activities, and having the skill set to understand what is efficient, what is not efficient, and how that overlaps with finances and corporate strategy is all really important. So our general initiative this year has been to do a lot of cross club events. So we find a lot of speakers through the industry that can speak to operations management. Like we recently had the VP of manufacturing strategy for Moderna speak, and we partnered with the healthcare club, and that event was really focused on how did Moderna adapt to suddenly making 2 billion vials of the COVID vaccine when they previously were making 19,000 or something in a year. So seeing that from an operations lens and not just a revenue go up kind of lens, I think was really insightful for our members, and that's the kind of thing we try to provide, amongst other things, for the club.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. And you touched on this in terms of those individuals that may not be as familiar with the operations management space. So, how does the club support recruiting for operations focused roles for those looking to pivot into operations?
Yeah, so for recruiting focus, it's a little bit, you'll probably hear like the different pathways for recruiting at an MIT. It's like the paved road and like the dirt road or something.
Mhm.
And operations management is definitely going to be on kind of the dirt road side. There is a number of, ways to get into the field, from like leadership development programs, which are a pretty popular way of getting in, because it helps you touch operations, but you also touch a lot of different areas of the business that a lot of people are interested in. But then you also have, kind of more traditional like supply chain, or especially like you have like an ops private equity associate or something that's going to be like super operations focused. The things that we really do is help facilitate connections between the companies and students. So when a lot of companies that want to recruit at MIT, and especially if it's an operations focus, will find the operations management club online, and then we'll send the team an email, and then we help facilitate either like coffee chats or connections from students to those companies. We also help scrape the Sloan Career Development Office has a job board that keeps a tab of any CDO vetted jobs, and if any of those are like applicable to our members' interests, we send out like a newsletter that kind of spotlights those opportunities.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. And along the lines of the career development office, could you talk about the, I guess, collaboration that you all have beyond like the job boards and, how they, help shape the trajectory of individuals, whether it's professionally, or somewhat academically as well, in terms of like trying to figure out which classes to take that align with their future goals?
Yeah, so I would say we don't the club doesn't work too much with with the career development office like throughout the school year, but we do provide information on what the CDO offers to students. So like, many in my case, in the way I used the CDO was like resume review. So when I had kind of identified I want to do operations, but like here's my resume. How can I get this to speak? It's kind of like a non-traditional background, military background. How can I get this to speak to the audience that I'm interested in? So when I guess I didn't mention earlier, I ended up doing an internship with a biotech company, Amgen. And I was really curious, how can I speak to a biotech company with my resume? The CDO office was able to kind of help me work through that resume and identifying the kind of critical skills that they would be looking for and how I could kind of integrate some of the coursework I had done in healthcare economics and operations projects and whatnot that were relevant to pharmaceuticals, which ended up working well for me and kind of translating that experience. So I would say, yeah, we don't do as much, directly working between like the club leadership and the CDO, but we help facilitate some of those connections from students to the CDO.
Gotcha. Thank you for clarifying that. And then for your internship with Amgen, I know
Yeah.
Amgen is one of our partner companies with LGO.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of connection we have there. As it pertains to specific, I guess, opportunities within LGO for like action learning or the, in this case, the domestic plant track. Can you talk about that experience where it's the domestic plant track as well as the 6-month internship that's associated with the LGO program and how individuals get a hands-on experience within the operation space?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, you hit on a good point with a lot of this industry is sometimes it takes time to actually be there in person to get like these up close experiences. One of the unique benefits of the LGO program is a trek that we do in January. And again, outside of the LGO program, there are other treks that Sloan students can be a part of that kind of accomplish a similar thing. But we do one in January we did 13 companies across the United States, and went like onto there again before, got tours of their manufacturing operations, and it was basically like a big networking trip, but also combined with a Gemba trip. So it was fantastic. I was on the committee that helped plan the event, which was like one of my highlights of my Sloan time, this time at LGO. Yeah, so I think that was a great opportunity for me just to get a better sense of like where do I see myself adding the most value? Where does the culture kind of align with what I'm interested in? There were some areas that we saw like Blue Origin, a space company, had like an incredible experience there and was able to kind of reflect more of whether that would be a good fit. The same thing with Amgen. Even though when I first visited Amgen, I didn't really understand what I was seeing. Eventually, the kind of the impressions that I got from that experience and the connections I built from just being on site at their manufacturing plant really stuck with me and inspired me to pursue it more. And then for the internship, yeah, so I went to North Carolina. It's the Research Triangle area is seeing a huge boom in biotech growth, especially as a lot of these biotech companies are being incentivized to build more in the United States, which most of them already do have a pretty substantial manufacturing capacity in the U.S., but they're being incentivized to grow even more. So the Research Triangle has seen a lot of that growth, and I wanted to go where that growth was, and I ended up doing a 6-month internship or 7-month internship with Amgen, and it was on their operations side. It's specifically looking at how can we build an AI powered tool to enable greater capacity and utilization at the manufacturing plant. So it was a really great experience. I mean, I would say about 30% of my time was spent on actually doing that application and working with the AI tool. And the rest of it was spent just on the building connections at the company, working on the manufacturing floor and helping out with tasks and getting a familiarization of like whether this would be a good fit for me. Which really helped inform later as I made design decisions on the application and worked with other like IT and developers to ensure that the application we were building was matching the operator's needs, because I had spent enough time on the floor to understand what was going to work in that context and what would be too cumbersome or not be useful, and not drive value for the plant.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that with me. And I know we're getting close to time for our moderated portion of the event. So those of you that are joining us, just feel free to continue to use the Q&A to ask more questions as we're, kind of wrapping up here. But Kendall, I did have another question for you as it pertains to like your experience. I know you're coming up on graduation time. We're about 2 months away now from graduation. And I think next week is the SIP and spring break kind of period. We have a 2-week break to kind of do some things in that particular period. Are there any plans for you for spring break or SIP that you wanted to share with the audience?
Yeah, so I'm in a unique circumstance. My wife and I actually just had our first baby a month ago. So my
Congrats.
life has completely changed. Yeah, I kind of knew coming into it, I probably wasn't going to have any spring break plans. And honestly, it's a relief to not be traveling right now. Our daughter is amazing, but she's also very high
Yes.
maintenance.
Mhm.
So yeah, I have a pretty tame spring break compared to most of my classmates, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm very
Yeah.
happy to be a father. Yeah.
Congratulations again. How old is your daughter?
She's a month old now.
Month old. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Newborn within the program. So
Yeah.
congratulations
Yeah.
again.
She was born right at the beginning of basically within 5 days or something of the semester starting, she was
Oh,
born.
wow.
So, yeah, it's been a unique semester to say the least.
For sure, for sure. I did have a question about your significant other, and like I know
Yeah.
we get questions about how they are incorporated within our community as well. Can you share,
Yeah.
how your SO has, found a community here during your 2 years here?
Yeah, I mean, we've one of the nice things with the LGO program, but even at Sloan is that significant others are a big part of the community, and especially if you have a significant other that has that is time and interest in being involved, they certainly can be. And we have created we've had like a really great community that we found here, particularly while I was on an internship. My wife still had a job here in Boston, so she ended up rooming with another spouse in the program, and they ended up becoming like really, really close friends. And she's really loved that from taking that from Sloan. And then we have a number of other like couple friends and also just girls in the program that have become really good friends with us. That has really helped us feel like we're part of a bigger community and kind of affirmed that this was like a great choice for us. Like particularly since we had our baby, we've had many people doing like a meal train and bringing meals over and helping us out as we kind of like adjust to new parent life. And that's just really affirmed how like fantastic the community's been and how much like she has felt supported and I felt supported as we've kind of like navigated this whole
Yeah.
journey.
For sure. So the Sony's helping Sony's mantra definitely expands beyond the students in the program. It's actually the community around you as well. So thank you for sharing
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
have a final two-part question for you as we transition to the open Q&A. So the first part of the question is, what's something you wish you'd known before diving into operations at Sloan? And then the second part of the question is, what is a piece of advice you would want to give to a prospective student that's, pursuing this maybe dual degree journey or this MBA journey?
Yeah, I think that the first thing I would think is don't get too focused on just taking things that are pertaining to operations, even if you're sure that's what you're interested in doing. There's such a wide variety of classes that can expose you to so many things that end up touching operations in a way you wouldn't have thought. For
Mhm.
example, I'm in like a corporate finance class, and we talked about production scheduling and the financial impacts of going to level of production versus just in time production. And from the operations perspective, I had just kind of always thought, well, the just in time probably makes more sense if your supply chain is kind of resilient. But, through the financial lens, we learned that actually it was going to be disastrous for a company to go to a level of production. So really interesting to kind of explore different areas of a business. Like I had also taken classes in competitive strategy, which doesn't touch on operation strategies at all. But as you get exposure to kind of these different concepts, you realize there's a lot of overlap and you want them to be complementary. You want like your company's competitive strategy to overlap with what their operations are, and the same thing with how their finances are set up. I think that, kind of no matter what your interests are coming into Sloan, I would encourage people to have an open mind to explore classes and concepts in subjects that they are not familiar with, because I think it will kind of make you a more effective leader, increases your awareness of the other areas of the business, even if you don't go into those areas. And I found gotten a lot of value out of kind of exploring and doing some kind of soul searching at Sloan.
Thank you for sharing that. So now we're going to transition to the open Q&A. We do have a few questions that popped in our chat. So I'll give you
Yeah.
time to kind of catch your breath and grab some water if necessary. But I'll ask a question here where it says, great conversation. The club sounds very interesting. For someone hoping to leverage the Sloan experience to launch a food system startup in an emerging market, how can students best take advantage of MIT's broader ecosystem, particularly the engineering and entrepreneurial resources across the institute?
Yeah, I mean, there is like countless ways that you can learn more about launching your startup. And I'm sure there is a whole, I believe we have a whole entrepreneurship club, which helps out with that. But even from like the first semester you're here, there is opportunities with Delta V, I think is what it's called,
Yep.
accelerator program, to help you workshop you that idea and get a lot of feedback on how that can be improved, how you could actually make this a reality, actually earn like win money to start that company, finding co-founders, especially, because there's so much in that Delta V program and that Martin Trust Center for Entrepreneurship. It's not just used by Sloan students. Mm-hmm. You get students from throughout the MIT community that come together. So if you need more technical expertise or somebody with a software background or operations or finance, like you will be able to find whatever resources you need to help your business grow. So yeah, entrepreneurship, if you're interested in that, there's no shortage of resources here.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll also add there's the academic standpoint as well, where there's a specific certificate you can earn in entrepreneurship and innovation to kind of get some more concentrated coursework around that as well, to kind of help you kind of mold your idea a little bit better too. So thank you for sharing that. The next question I have for you is about the LGO program. So how do you think the LGO or MIT in general prepares students to think about connecting operational decisions with broader competitive company strategy?
How does can you say the question again?
Yeah.
Sorry.
How do you think LGO prepares students to think about connecting operational decisions with broader company strategy?
Yeah, I think that the case method at Sloan helps a lot with that, because you're not just looking at, you don't get myopic about operations and just looking at like what is the most efficient solution for a business. I think that all the professors, they come from a business standpoint when it comes to operations. So even in like the supply chain classes I've had, we're not just talking about like the supply chain implications or the disruption implications for a company, but how can you communicate this to a business leader? We get so much information on, there's a lot of coursework we get on communicating with data, persuading people, tying in, what you understand at a technical level about what a company should do to kind of the broader implications for a company. So I think part of it comes from just exposure. Like the more you understand finance and strategy, competitive strategy, that will naturally make you better at connecting those two. And then if you just didn't know anything about finance, which you get that a lot. The president of Zipcar came and spoke to the operations management club a week ago and talked about, he had kind of come from an operations background, and as he kind of stepped into the role previously, the previous presidents had kind of just looked at everything from a financial perspective. How can we have each of our cars making the most money possible? But from an operations perspective, he recognized that there was like a lot of unallocated assets and a lot of operational inefficiencies that were actually driving a lot more damage to their bottom line than like their marketing campaigns or revenue strategy or something. So I think exposure is like the biggest thing. And then we have a lot of, there's like we have operations lab, for example, where you can actually take on an operations project with a company, and that could help you get a better understanding of the connection between all those different pillars.
Thank you for sharing. I have another Ops Management Club focus question where it says, does the Operations Management Club focus exclusively on the skills needed for physical operations, or is there any programming related to operation in a less asset heavy field?
Yeah, we try to cover a wide range of operations, not just like we're doing a tech operations panel in a couple weeks. And that's, yeah, definitely focused on less asset heavy organizations, but still like the execution of business activities. So we try to cover a range of operations and not just like supply chain or manufacturing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Another question as it pertains to like involvement with the club. So how do Ops Club members leverage their involvement when recruiting for ops focused roles?
I think that I mean, so the involvement in the club can help open your network and kind of bring you to more opportunities than you might have had previously. So I think there is an element of your network being open. And I think the other element um is kind of your personal ability to kind of sell yourself and your background. I think that having your involvement in the club leadership, I think it's a minor signal, but I think you can help drive that to be a large signal as you are applying to like positions, particular in management positions, that this is, a field you're interested in and that you have like spent considerable time developing yourself in, have shown leadership capabilities, particularly if you didn't come to Sloan with like leadership background or maybe less formal leadership background. I think that can help you as well. Um, but I think it's like I kind of think of it the same way as how you leverage a class that you took into Sloan. Like I think a job, a recruiter might not be asking specifically if you took XYZ course and to be a prerequisite to the job. But you can kind of sell that material and how that, strengthens your overall brand.